Karen huffed in frustration as she glared at the sleek black Jeep Wrangler parked in her neighbor's driveway. The rugged off-road vehicle was an eyesore, clashing horribly with the pristine landscaping and perfectly manicured lawn that defined their prestigious gated community. As the head of the Homeowners Association, Karen took great pride in maintaining the neighborhood's impeccable aesthetic. This Jeep was an abomination, a blight on the carefully curated suburban perfection she worked tirelessly to uphold. Gripping the steering wheel of her Toyota Camry, Karen fumed. She had sent multiple violation notices to her neighbor, but the infuriating man refused to remove the offending vehicle. Enough was enough. It was time to take matters into her own hands. Glancing furtively around the quiet street, Karen unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out of her car. Heart pounding, she hurried across the lawn, her eyes locked on the Jeep. With a quick glance over her shoulder, she grabbed the door handle and yanked it open. "This ends today," she muttered, sliding into the driver's seat. Her fingers trembled as she inserted the key into the ignition, half expecting the owner to come barreling out of the house at any moment. But the neighborhood remained eerily silent. Karen took a deep breath and turned the key. The engine roared to life, and she let out a triumphant laugh. Finally, some peace and quiet in this. Her celebration was cut short by a sudden, piercing siren. Karen froze, her eyes going wide as a police cruiser materialized out of nowhere, blocking her escape. "Mom, step out of the vehicle with your hands in the air," a booming voice commanded through a megaphone. Karen's heart raced as she slowly complied, her hands trembling as she exited the Jeep. She had never been on the wrong side of the law before, and the realization that she had just committed a serious crime sent a shiver down her spine. As the officers approached, Karen opened her mouth to protest, to explain that this was all a misunderstanding. But the words died on her lips when she noticed the small black camera mounted on the Jeep's dashboard, blinking softly. The police officers swiftly handcuffed Karen, their faces etched with a mixture of exasperation and disbelief. As they ushered her into the back seat of the cruiser, Karen's mind raced with a whirlwind of emotions: indignation, fear, and a growing sense of dread. "This is outrageous," she exclaimed, struggling against the cuffs. "I'm the head of the Homeowners Association. You can't treat me like some common criminal." The lead officer, a seasoned veteran with a stern expression, merely shook his head. "Ma'am, we've been monitoring your neighbor's property for weeks. We have you on camera attempting to steal his vehicle." Karen felt her face flush with humiliation. She had been so sure that she would get away with it, that her position of power would shield her from any consequences. But now, as the reality of her situation dawned on her, she realized just how foolish and reckless her actions had been. As the police car pulled away, Karen caught a glimpse of her neighbor, a smug grin plastered across his face. She gritted her teeth, fuming at the thought of him enjoying her downfall. This was his fault, she told herself. If he had just complied with the HOA's regulations, none of this would have happened. The ride to the police station was agonizingly long, and Karen spent the entire time berating the officers, insisting that they had no right to arrest her. But her pleas fell on deaf ears, and she knew deep down that she had no one to blame but herself. When they arrived, Karen was processed and booked, her fingerprints and mugshot taken. The weight of her actions finally sank in, and she felt a sense of dread and panic wash over her. What would her family think? How would this affect her standing in the community? As she was led to a holding cell, Karen's mind raced with a mix of fear and resignation. She had always prided herself on being in control, on maintaining the perfect facade of suburban bliss. But now that facade had shattered, and she was left to face the consequences of her own hubris. The harsh fluorescent lights and the cold, sterile environment of the holding cell only served to heighten Karen's sense of discomfort and vulnerability. She paced back and forth, her manicured nails digging into the palms of her hands as she struggled to come to terms with her predicament. Thoughts of her impeccable reputation, her meticulously curated image, and her position of power within the Homeowners Association all seemed to crumble around her. Karen had always believed that her status and influence would shield her from any real consequences, but now she found herself facing the harsh reality of her own actions. As the hours ticked by, Karen's initial indignation slowly gave way to a growing sense of panic. She had never been in trouble with the law before, and the prospect of a criminal record, potential jail time, and the irreparable damage to her reputation filled her with a sense of dread. Suddenly, the sound of the cell door opening startled her, and she whirled around to see a stern-faced police officer standing in the doorway. "Mrs. Johnson, the district attorney is ready to see you," the officer announced, his tone conveying no hint of sympathy. Karen's heart raced as she was led through the maze of hallways and into a small, dimly lit room. Seated at a cluttered desk was a middle-aged man with a graying beard, his brow furrowed as he studied a stack of papers in front of him. "Mrs. Johnson, I'm District Attorney Harrington," he said, looking up and fixing Karen with a piercing gaze. "I have to say I'm quite surprised to see someone of your standing here today." Karen straightened her posture, determined to maintain an air of composure and authority, despite the turbulent emotions swirling within her. "This is all a misunderstanding, I assure you," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "I was simply trying to—" "Save it, Mrs. Johnson," Harrington interrupted, his tone sharp and unyielding. "We have you on camera, attempting to steal your neighbor's vehicle. That's a felony, no matter how you try to spin it." Karen's blood ran cold as the reality of her situation sank in. She had always believed that her position of power would protect her, but now it seemed that even the law was not immune to her influence. As the district attorney's words echoed in her ears, Karen felt a surge of panic and desperation. This couldn't be happening to her. She was the respected head of the Homeowners Association, a pillar of the community. The very idea of being treated like a common criminal was simply unthinkable. "You don't understand," she pleaded, her voice quivering. "I was only trying to ensure the integrity of our neighborhood. That Jeep was an eyesore, a blight on the carefully curated image I've worked so hard to maintain." Harrington's expression remained impassive as he leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. "That may be your perspective, Mrs. Johnson, but the law doesn't make exceptions for personal vendettas or misguided attempts at maintaining neighborhood integrity." Karen's mind raced, grasping for any argument, any angle that might sway the district attorney. "Please, you have to understand. I'm not a criminal. I've dedicated my life to making this community a better place. Surely there must be some way to resolve this without ruining my reputation and my family's future." The district attorney's brow furrowed, and for a moment, Karen thought she saw a flicker of sympathy in his eyes. But it was quickly replaced by a steely resolve. "I'm afraid the evidence against you is quite clear, Mrs. Johnson. Attempting to steal a vehicle, even if it's in the name of community standards, is a serious offense. I'm not at liberty to simply overlook it, no matter your standing in the neighborhood." Karen felt the weight of his words like a physical blow, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. She had always believed that her position of power and influence would shield her from the consequences of her actions. But now, she found herself facing the harsh reality of the law. As she was led back to the holding cell, Karen's mind raced with a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, fear, and a growing sense of despair. She had to find a way out of this, a way to salvage her reputation and her future. Failure was simply not an option. Back in the confines of the holding cell, Karen paced relentlessly, her mind a whirlwind of desperate plans and anxious thoughts. She couldn't let this happen. Her position, her status, her very identity were all on the line. She had to find a way to beat this, no matter the cost. Suddenly, an idea began to take shape in her mind. Perhaps she could appeal to the district attorney's sense of decency, or even leverage her connections within the community to make this all go away. Surely, someone of her standing couldn't be subjected to the same rules as the common rabble. Filled with a newfound sense of determination, Karen approached the cell door and called out for the officer. When he arrived, she put on her most charming smile and spoke in a soft, measured tone. "Officer, I understand the gravity of the situation, but surely there must be some way we can resolve this without ruining my life. I'm a pillar of this community, respected by everyone. Surely the district attorney would be willing to overlook this minor indiscretion." The officer regarded her with a mixture of skepticism and pity. "I'm sorry, Mom, but the district attorney doesn't make deals. The evidence against you is pretty solid. I'd suggest you start planning your defense." Karen's heart sank, but she refused to give up. Please, you have to understand. I'm not some common criminal. This is all a misunderstanding. I was simply trying to maintain the integrity of our neighborhood. Surely that counts for something. The officer shook his head, his expression hardening. Ma'am, I get that you're used to calling the shots around here, but the law doesn't make exceptions. You broke the law, and now you'll have to face the consequences. Frustration and anger bubbled within Karen as she watched the officer walk away. How dare he dismiss her so easily? Didn't he understand who she was? She was the head of the Homeowners Association, a respected pillar of the community. This wasn't supposed to happen to her. With a renewed sense of determination, Karen began to formulate a new plan. If the system wouldn't bend to her will, then she would simply have to find a way to bend it to her own. As the hours ticked by in the sterile confines of the holding cell, Karen's mind raced with a flurry of desperate ideas. She couldn't accept the gravity of her situation, the prospect of facing criminal charges, and the potential ruination of her carefully cultivated reputation. Pacing back and forth, Karen's thoughts turned to the network of connections and influence she had carefully built over the years within the community. Surely there had to be someone she could call upon, someone who could pull the necessary strings to make this all go away. Suddenly, an idea began to take shape in her mind. Reaching into her purse, Karen retrieved her phone and began scrolling through her contacts, her fingers trembling with a mix of determination and desperation. Her eyes landed on the number of her old friend, Councilman Robert Sinclair. The two had a long history of working together, with Karen often leveraging her position within the Homeowners Association to sway local politics in Sinclair's favor. Surely he would be willing to return the favor in her time of need. Without hesitation, Karen dialed the number, her heart pounding as the line connected. Robert, it's Karen. I'm in trouble and I need your help. The conversation that followed was a delicate dance of influence, favors, and veiled threats. Karen knew precisely how to play the game, wielding her position and connections like a well-honed weapon. As the call drew to a close, a satisfied smile crept across Karen's face. She had done it. She had managed to secure Sinclair's intervention, knowing full well that the district attorney would be powerless to resist the weight of such political influence. With a newfound sense of confidence, Karen settled back on the hard bench of the holding cell, the weight of her predicament lifting ever so slightly. She had beaten the system before, and she had no doubt that she would do so again. But little did Karen know that her machinations were being closely watched, and the consequences of her actions were about to take an unexpected and far more sinister turn. As Karen basked in the glow of her supposed victory, the sound of the cell door creaking open once again startled her. This time, however, it was not the stern-faced officer she had spoken to earlier, but a group of somber-looking individuals in suits. "Mrs. Johnson, we need you to come with us," one of the men said, his voice devoid of any warmth or emotion. Karen felt a pang of unease as she eyed the group, her mind racing with possibilities. Had her call to Councilman Sinclair not worked as she had planned? Had the district attorney somehow seen through her attempted manipulation? "What's going on?" she demanded, her voice betraying a hint of the trepidation she felt. "I thought I had this all sorted out." The men exchanged a brief glance before the one who had spoken stepped forward. "Ma'am, we're with the FBI. We've been investigating a corruption ring within the local government, and your name has come up. We need you to come with us for further questioning." Karen's blood ran cold as the gravity of the situation sank in. The FBI? Corruption? She had never imagined that her carefully orchestrated attempts to leverage her influence would lead her down such a perilous path. As she was led out of the holding cell and into an unmarked van, Karen's mind raced with a myriad of emotions, fear, disbelief, and a growing sense of dread. She had thought she had the upper hand, but now it seemed that the tables had been turned, and she was the one facing the consequences of her actions. The ride to the FBI field office was tense and uncomfortable, and Karen found herself unable to shake the feeling that she was being watched, studied, and judged. When they arrived, she was ushered into a small, windowless room where a team of agents began to interrogate her, their questions probing and relentless. As the hours ticked by, Karen's resolve began to crumble and she realized that her carefully constructed web of influence and power was no match for the might of the federal government. She had underestimated the gravity of her situation, and now she was facing the grim reality of the consequences. As the grueling interrogation wore on, Karen found herself increasingly overwhelmed and disoriented. The agent's steady barrage of questions, their unwavering gaze, and the stark, unforgiving environment of the FBI field office had worn down her defenses, leaving her feeling exposed and vulnerable. No longer able to maintain the facade of composure and authority, Karen began to crack under the pressure. Her carefully constructed narratives and well-rehearsed denials unraveled as the agents methodically dismantled her alibis and exposed the web of corruption and deceit that had defined her reign as the head of La Homeowners Association. With each new revelation, Karen's heart sank deeper. The realization that her actions had not only jeopardized her own standing, but had also implicated Councilman Sinclair and others within the local government left her feeling overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the consequences she now faced. As the interrogation drew to a close, the agents made it clear that Karen's actions had not only violated the law, but had also betrayed the very community she had claimed to serve. Her attempts to manipulate the system for her own gain had backfired spectacularly, leaving her stripped of her power and facing the prospect of a lengthy prison sentence. In the end, Karen was escorted back to the holding cell, her head bowed in defeat. The once proud and unyielding HOA Karen had been brought low, her downfall a testament to the dangers of unchecked ambition and the corrosive nature of unchecked power. As she sat alone in the cell, Karen's mind drifted to the surveillance camera she had discovered on the Jeep, the silent witness to her downfall. Perhaps, in some twisted way, it had been a blessing in disguise, a wake-up call that had forced her to confront the true cost of her actions. With a heavy sigh, Karen resigned herself to the fact that her reign of suburban tyranny had come to an end. The future, once so neatly curated and controlled, now lay before her as a vast and uncertain landscape. And as she contemplated the consequences of her choices, Karen knew that her journey had only just begun.